Howdy folks, and welcome back to Bagel Dog DIY. I'm your host Ben. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to install a frost-free spigot like the one you see here in the garden. In fact, it's going to be the one you see here in the garden. To get started, like on any plumbing project, the first thing we're going to do is shut the water off. In my house it's super easy. I head down to the basement, I go to where the well pump comes in, and I shut the water off. With any of these valves like this, the direction the valve is facing, like crossways there, as the water is off. If it's in line with the pipe, the water is on. Then I go and release the pressure by turning on a bathroom faucet. Water's still going to leak when I cut open the plumbing line, but that'll save me a little bit of, I don't know, pressure bursting out in my face when I cut open the plumbing line. Then I go down to the basement. This is the outside wall, or I think it's the outside wall. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. I'm going to tap into this water line here. This is the water supply line for the toilet, for the bathroom above my head right there. I'm going to drill an 1.125" hole through that floor joist. Tap right into that with a T and a shutoff valve. And install that exterior frost-free spigot. Should be pretty straightforward. But like most things, it never is. So I get up there on my ladder. I get my 1.125" Forstner bits. I get my drill out. And I drill a hole. And then I take my tube and I realize it doesn't go outside. It hits another floor joist about 8 inches away. So that was not the exterior joist. They doubled up on the end there. So then I have a conundrum of how do I line that hole up? How do I line up a hole at the outside? So you can see me thinking here. This happens in every project. Most YouTubers don't show this, but yeah, just sitting here thinking. What I end up doing is I measure off of where that cold water valve goes through the floor for my toilet valve. I go up in the bathroom and I measure over, and I measure from in the basement over to where I drilled my hole. It's like 54 inches, I think. And then I can measure to that window because that's the only exterior feature I have. And so I measure off of that window for my mark that I made in the bathroom. So from the outside of the house, you can see my finger there pointing. I end up measuring, I think it was 34 inches off of the window. And then I know that all my other spigots on the house, or my other spigot on the house, is in the second row of my siding. So I drill in the center of my second row of my siding. And that should match up with my hole that I drilled inside. But I run into another problem, which you'll see in a second. And so I go outside here, make my mark, measure over, I drill through. Again, it's just an 1.125" Forstner bit. You do want to run it in reverse if you have vinyl siding like this. It'll cut through the siding instead of digging in. And then going forward. I also make a mistake here, and you can see I'm drilling at an angle down. When you install these frost-free spigots, you want to actually drill at an upward angle. I fix that later. It's not a big deal, but just, you know, that's how they drain. The water drains out, is the actual angle that they're at. So anyway, I get my hole drilled through here. And then you'll see I'll go back around into the basement. Just getting it nice and drilled out. And I'm going to try to line up my piece of PEX tubing. I'm going to try to thread it through both those holes. So then I'm back in the basement, and this is where I run into my second problem. As you can see here in this freeze frame, my head doesn't actually, I can't see if my holes line up. I can't get my head in there and turn it sideways enough to actually look in the hole, if that makes any sense. So I drill a second hole a few inches away, a small 1.125" hole. This whole thing ends up looking like Swiss cheese. It's fine. It's all going to get covered eventually. But so I drill a second hole, and I see that my holes actually are pretty close to lining up. My measurements worked, measuring off the cold water toilet valve where it comes through the floor and off the window, and all my calculations actually ended up working. And so I end up drilling a larger hole. I'm off by about 1 inch, so I take a 2-inch Forstner bit. That's the one nice thing about Forstner bits as opposed to hole saws, is you can drill overlapping holes with them. So I drill a little bit larger hole, so I have some room, and then I feed my PEX through there, and it goes right to the outside. Now in this freeze frame here, I just pause here so I can show you how these actually work. I'll refer to this as a frost-free or a self-draining spigot. So the valve is actually where my hand is, the on-off valve that actually controls the water flow. So when you shut the water off, that whole 10-inch tube there's a little hole, a drain hole on top. The water drains out of it. So that's 10 inches inside my wall that has no water in it, as long as you remember to disconnect your hose. So this keeps them from freezing in the winter, because the inside of your house is warm, as opposed to if the shutoff were right up against where you turn the water off, the spigot there, it would freeze because it gets cold inside your walls. So anyway, that's how these work. This is called a frost-free or self-draining spigot. I don't know. They have a bunch of different names. Everybody calls them different things depending on where you're from. I call it a frost-free spigot. So yeah, that's the reason that you need it to actually angle down, is you need that copper tube that goes inside your wall to drain. So I get my hole drilled there. You can see I crimp on my PEX fitting with my crimp tool. I put some caulking on the back here, and then I'm just going to push it in and level it up. And then make sure you use exterior grade screws here. I can't tell you how many times I see these and somebody uses drywall screws and they rust, and it's just not, use exterior screws here outside. So make sure you use exterior screws. You'll see me screw this to the house here. The other cool thing about these spigots like this is that they're serviceable. So if that valve eventually wears out inside there, a little rubber gasket, you'll see the nut on the end here where the handle is. You can take that nut off and pull out the whole internals, and they make rebuild kits. So this is actually a really long lasting. These are great spigots. And this one is actually a quarter turn. You'll see me turn it here. So it's just a quarter turn on and off. That's the type I prefer. You don't have to spend a ton of time turning things back and forth. Save the arthritis on the hands. So that's your outside part done. It's hooked up there, it's screwed into the house, exterior screws, it's caulked. That's all there is to it. Now you'll see me go around to the inside here, and you'll see those extra holes I'm talking about. There's that small one I drilled. That's just so I can see with my head at an angle. And then you'll see the bigger one I drilled there. And the PEX is actually still rubbing on it a little bit, so I actually do end up drilling another larger one overlapping that big one, just so there's no tension on the water line. Here's me doing the plumbing. I get my bucket up there. I cut open the water line that I'm going to use. I put a shutoff valve on it. This is just, I don't know. I don't really think you can have too many shutoff valves. It makes servicing these things easier if I ever need to service this in the future. This will also isolate part of my bathroom if I ever needed to service anything in my bathroom. Of course, I have my main shutoff valve. Some people would argue this adds extra connections. It's another place that can leak. I don't know. I think more shutoff valves is nicer. So when I install something like this, I put a shutoff valve in, I put a T in there, I crimp it all together with the PEX fittings, and then I go turn the water on. Easy peasy, not a big deal. And then you're just going to go and check all your PEX connections. Make sure there's no leaks. I'll get back up on the ladder here. You'll actually be able to see what I did with all the plumbing. You can see there's that inline shutoff ball valve that I put on right there. I turn the water on. I check just with my hand running over those connections there. You can see that connection's actually 10 inches inside the wall there for the spigot. Yeah, and I go upstairs and shut off the sink that I had turned on to let the pressure out of the lines so it wasn't running, and get all these lines pressurized up. And again, just running my hands over there and making sure there's no leaks. Checking all my crimp connections. These are just simple PEX crimp connections. They make these spigots. You can buy them with whatever connection you have. They can buy them with solder copper, with shark bite connections. They make them with any type of end. I happen to have PEX. It's real easy for me. It's all exposed in the basement. But yeah, you can see the hole I ended up drilling there, the Swiss cheese of holes. Not the most professional looking thing, but it's all to code. I'm more than an inch away from the joist there. Everything's totally fine. And you go outside. Listen to that water. And then you can see when I shut it off here, it keeps draining, and that's the water actually draining out of that pipe there. That's what keeps it frost free. So I hope this video was informative. Again, if you have a basement, it's really easy to add a spigot like this. A lot of people, you maybe have a different setup. It might be harder to get to a water line. But anywhere you can access a supply line, you can add a spigot to the outside of your house. These frost-free ones are great. Make sure you actually get it into some insulated space. They make them in all different depths too. This is a 10-inch one. They make an 18-inch deep one. They make a 20-inch deep one. So you can really get that valve back buried inside a space that's nice and warm, so you don't have any frost issues. I hope this video was helpful. Go out and build something. Cheers. Have a great rest of your week.